Any Alice Cooper fans in the house? My name's Chuck Moore, and very first Texas Frightmare Weekend, my band Freak 13 played here. And the reason I had that band, which is a horror metal band, is because of Alice Cooper. And without any further ado, the master of shock rock, the guy who did it before Kiss, before Wasp, before Marilyn Manson, Alice Cooper. Are we rolling with this? Is this mic on? Okay.
Hello. I'm not used to being in front of all these people with a mic.
Never happened before, right? All right, well, I know you got questions. Let's see some hands come up.
No math.
No math?
Yeah.
All right, this guy over here with the camera. Yes, sir.
It's funny, when I was a kid in Detroit, our families used to drop us off on Saturday morning at the movie theater, and then we would just stay there all day, and it was always a triple, it came from Beneath the Sea, all those great 50s horror movies. We'd stayed there all day, so that was like my favorite thing in the world was those type of horror movies. But I think later on, movies like Carnival of Souls, that was a movie that just kind of like, I went, what was that? It was a very freaky movie for me. And I kind of like, I find a lot of that stuff showing up in my shows. When she's in the ballroom dancing with all the dead guys, with all the black eyes and everything, that ended up being kind of showing up in my show. What else? The Haunting, the original Haunting, Claire Bloom. Was one of the scariest movies. But back then they weren't splatter movies. They were more psychological, horror. And that was the Harryhausen period too, where it was a lot of animation stuff that was great. But I always thought that those type of 50s, late 50s, early 60s movies in black and white were always really good, Didn't really discover some of the stuff till later.
Right here?
Yes, so many of your albums read, like a movie script, and love the new album. Have there been any serious inquiries as to a script for Along Came a Spider?
Well, Along Came a Spider, they actually asked my daughter Calico to write the novel around it.
Right.
She would do that very well. To me, it wrote itself pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, and the thing about that story was that you have a serial killer, and he's basically, they find his diary, and all the songs are out of his diary, and then at the end when he says, "We couldn't have done that. We've been here for 28 years in this insane asylum for 28 years." Then that leaves you with two things. Either it was all in his head, none of it really happened. All this diary, he just wrote it down because it was going on in his head. Or there's another killer. So we left the audience with that. In other words, choose your own ending on that. But
is there a movie studio interested in it?
there was a movie called Along Came a Spider that was about a serial killer, but it had nothing to do with this one. I just liked the title alone. I had that idea for that years ago, 15 years ago. And finally got around to writing it, and I wanted to make it totally different from the movie. But it's funny how a lot of our titles come out of nursery rhymes. There's always something that's nice and sweet about the nursery rhyme, and then when you turn it into a horror movie, it takes on a whole different world. That was the same idea behind Alice Cooper.
Right.
I mean, we could have called ourselves the Husky Baby Sandwich or something, But I figured that, every Black Sabbath and all this, that came after us, but don't give it a scary name. Give it a really nice name. Alice Cooper was sort of a sweet little old lady that lived down the block that would probably eat you.
I think this guy in the front right here. Yeah.
Alice, in 1975, you taped the ABC special Nightmare, featuring narration by Vincent Price and also pre-MTV music videos for all the songs on the Welcome to My Nightmare album. Since Welcome to My Nightmare, the concert was released on DVD, can you ever hope to see the Nightmare special released on DVD?
you hear that, Toby?
What?
It's a question about if they're going to re-release anything.
The Nightmare TV special?
Uh-huh.
Nightmare TV special.
There's some confusion about the actual ownership of the copyright that's scaring everybody off. We're trying to get everyone to sort of indemnify each other and let us resolve it. There's a copyright ownership issue on that one.
The lucky thing about me is that I don't do any business at all. I stay so far away from business that, in all honesty, I don't have any idea how much I make in a concert. I don't have any. They learned a long time ago never to put me in charge of any business, because everything would be free pretty much. I think, I would just, yeah, Scott, come in. I don't care, But I've had the same manager now, Shep Gordon, for 40 years. And Shep and I have been together for a long time, and our deal was always, you take care of the business, I'll take care of the art of this whole thing. And that's the way it's always been. I don't see why an artist should have any knowledge of business at all. That totally kills the idea of what they're doing. So he never bothers me with that. And I never kind of like, if somebody asks me a question like that, who has the rights? I go, I don't know. I wrote it, but somebody has the rights to it. I know I own a piece of it or part of it or whatever, but I would never know what the contractual thing would be. It was fun having Vincent Price on that, though. When Bob Ezrin and I were talking, we said, who do we want to do this? Who do we want to be the curator of the Spider Museum? And of course we thought, well, Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, who's alive from that era. And Vincent Price came up, and of course that was the perfect one. That was the one that we called him. He came down and he says, do you mind if I rewrite it? And I said, for Vincent Price, you can do anything you want with it, I'm your subordinate here. And so he rewrote part of it. And then I think he did one take. It was perfect. You couldn't outdo what he did on that. And so we didn't want to, as soon as it was done, I said, we're not going to touch a bit of it. It's too good. And he went on to do the actual show with us. He went to Tahoe. We did Lake Tahoe, and he was on stage with us, which was, I think, the first time he was ever in any rock and roll production at all. Later on, he did the Michael Jackson thing, but we literally gave him his first platinum album.
I actually have a question. Your horror seems to have evolved quite a bit over the years. I mean, from Welcome My Nightmare to the Gale Chop 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 story on Raise Your Fist and Yell to songs about like Columbine and social things like on Brutal Planet. Has that been a conscious move or just something that just came along when these various changes in society happened?
It's what affects you. Anything that affects you, I think you're going to write about. I find an awful lot of religious stuff going on in my writing because I grew up in a Christian house. My dad was a pastor, my granddad was a pastor. All of my friends when I was a kid were church kids, and it went back to that. Literally went back to that 15 years ago. But I look back at records songs I was writing early on when I was far away from any Christianity, and so many Christian and so many religious lyrics coming up, Second Coming and stuff like that. And so I think that there's always been an ongoing morality play that goes through my songs. And the villain never, ever gets away with it.
Yeah.
And on my stage show, I play the villain most of the time, so I never get away with it. They either hang me or cut my head off or something, and then I come back in white top hat and tails, which is sort of like a resurrection, and without me really knowing that, that's how I had written a lot of stuff. Sometimes if you're an artist and you're a writer, you just start writing, and you don't really care until the very end. You start. I would hate to take my stuff to a psychiatrist and say, "What does this all mean?" Bob Dylan once told me. He says, "I said, well, Subterranean Homesick Blues," and I'm talking about all the lyrics, and he goes, "That just sounded good." What? And he says, "Well, it just sounded good. It rhymed." So a lot of things that you think that are stories that are being deep underlying meanings, maybe there are, but sometimes they're totally unconscious. Sometimes they just sound good.
Well, I always thought there was a difference between like the Wasp and the Marilyn Mansons in that Alice did get punished for his bad deeds, and it wasn't just for shock value. There was kind of an actual story going on. Instead of just
you have to. What movie have you ever seen that's not fun? The fun thing about a movie is knowing, and I don't care what horror movie you rent, the bad guy, the villain, is always going to find a way to blow it. That's part of the satisfaction, I think, of of it. You know, there's not one villain that doesn't end up getting it or getting, you know, his punishment in the end. And that's satisfying to all of us. If the bad guy got away with it, you'd kind of, that's not finished. And that's kind of what kind of fuels Michael Myers and Jason and, you know, the ongoing thing that you just can't kill him, you know. There's such a fine line between comedy and horror to me. If you can't put, I can't think of one really good horror movie that doesn't make me laugh, you know. And it's because it's so over the top. Evil Dead. I remember the first time I watched Evil Dead and I said, there can't be any more blood in this movie. And then the pipe breaks and he's covered in blood. And I went, okay, you know. So when you get movies that are so over the top splatter that you're laughing because it's just, come on, you know. That to me is what makes it funny. The one movie that didn't have a great sense of humor was The Exorcist. If you think of it, it didn't, and that's what made it one of the scariest movies of all time. Is it didn't attack your sense of humor, or it didn't attack your psychology part. It attacked your soul, and that made it even a deeper kind of scare. I look at that movie and I'm trying to find the humor in it, and I didn't find any humor in it anywhere in that. So that's what made that movie so scary.
Hi, Alice. One of the greatest television moments of all time was you were co-hosting this show called I think it was the Rock Music Awards with Diana Ross?
Yeah, Diana Ross. Scary.
You have not seen that. You can't find it on YouTube or anything, but you went out into the audience and pulled somebody out in front of the crowd and beat the crap out of them.
It's my wife.
And then ran off stage and came back on with Goes to Hell.
Yeah.
Anything to say about like ultraviolence? Because that was one of the greatest things about your shows, especially during the Good to See You Again, Alice Cooper. Ultraviolence in the shows.
We didn't tell anybody we were going to do that, for one thing. That was the great idea behind it. I told the producer and the director, you got Diana Ross, you got Alice Cooper. I said, I can't just get up here and be the MC for the Grammy Awards or whatever the movie awards, the music awards it was. So at some point, I said, we've got to break down this traditional show and do something that's pure Alice. So my wife, Cheryl, who was the ballerina in the show, in the Nightmare Show, was sitting in the front with a Dior gown on, but underneath she had all this black bondage stuff on. And she was sitting there very nicely and quietly, and at one point I just said to Diana Ross, I can't do this. I said, this is real, I just can't. I knocked the podium over and I went down, I grabbed her and I pulled her up on stage and pulled the dress off, and she got all the black bondage, and then from the back, all of these girls with whips came out, and it was like a production number that came out of nowhere, and the camera guys didn't know what to do because we didn't rehearse it. So and it looked like, when somebody gets shot on TV and the cameras don't know where to go, and it was like that, and then finally it got its position, and you realized, oh, he got us, and the funny thing was, now this is brilliant, okay? That was a brilliant move, and it really, everybody went crazy on it. During the break, Diana Ross and her people, being the professionals that they are, in 5 minutes invented an award for Diana Ross. And now the Entertainer of the Century Award. And I went, what? Because you couldn't upstage Diana Ross. And I went, that's brilliant. They invented an award. They put it together. They built it out of plastic somehow back there, out of things. And there it was. And I looked there, I said, that's brilliant. I said, you guys are good. Because I totally took them off guard. I took the legs right out of I just stole the show from her, and then she took it back. And I went, that's great. Diana Ross is now on my A list.
Right in the back, yeah.
You.
One of my favorite performances by you is The Muppet Show. Reminiscences about Jim Henson and doing that whole...
Well, I wasn't going to do the show because I thought, well, I'm the scourge of rock and roll right now, and I got everybody terrified. Why should I do the Muppet Show? That just waters me right down. And I kind of looked. I said, well, let me see. Vincent Price did it. Christopher Lee did it. And I looked at all the characters. Peter Sellers did it. John Cleese. I should do this show. So we went there, and They were the greatest people in the world, Jim Henson's people. They had it all worked out that it would be a Faust. Alice trying to get Kermit to sell his soul to be a rock star, which is a very funny idea, you know. And you find yourself, the great thing about the Muppets is, you're so taken in by the characters that's on a guy's hand that they become real. So I'm, rehearsing with Miss Piggy, and I'm going, it would be funny if you put your head on my shoulder right here. And it would be funny if you put because you realize after about, if you start talking, you're talking, and while you're talking, the hands go, oh, really? That's a good idea, Oh, nice idea. So you're totally taken in by this. And when you're rehearsing, I swear, they are personalities. The characters, Kermit, they say, okay, let's try that again. And Kermit goes, yeah, I didn't like the way that went. And I went, no, I didn't. I didn't like the way that.
Yes, sir.
Alice, what do you listen to now? What new music do you listen to?
Yeah, I listen to everybody. I've got my own radio show, so I listen to a lot of, a lot of people. I'm not one of those old rockers that sits around going, well, all the good songs have been written, blah, 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 because I'm always wanting to hear that new band that it's generally a garage band that has got the spirit of the garage band. All of the really good bands were garage bands. The Rolling Stones were a garage band. The Yardbirds were a garage band. We started in a garage. And to me, when I hear 15, 16, 17-year-old kids listening to early Rolling Stones and early Kinks and getting that sound, the Hives did it, the Strokes did it, the Vines, I really think that's authentic rock and roll for kids. That's really good teenage rock and roll. I hate really overly produced rock and roll. Unfortunately, a lot of bands start in the studio and then go play live gigs. You have to be a band that starts in a bar and plays 5 years in a bar, doing everything from Mustang Sally to, before you should even get in a studio. You should be a great live band before you get in the studio. Then you should be in the studio. It's too bad, and the bands now are going backwards in this, and they don't have much of a lifespan, because when there are no more record stores, which is happening right now, live music is going to be the premium. Live music is what you're going to be listening to more than anything else. I hate listening to rock and roll on a computer. To me, it's just, I want to hear a band. And you can't even get it even on a DVD. You're still not getting it. You got to go see a live band. That's the difference between a band and just a bunch of guys,
Got time for a couple more questions? Yeah, you right here. Yes, sir.
That's all I found fascinating about you. Unlike other rockers who just kind of hang out with other rockers, I heard a rumor that you actually hang out with silent film era stars back when you were first getting famous, like Harpo Marx. Can you share some of those stories with us?
Those were some of the guys that I really wanted to meet. I got to meet the Beatles, and I was totally, stoked that I got to be friends with the Beatles, and the Stones and Dylan and Elvis. Elvis was out there. And then I said, but who do I really want to meet? I really want to meet the real legends. I wanted to meet Fred Astaire. I wanted to meet the Marx Brothers. I wanted to meet Errol Flynn. People like that, the people that were the real movie stars. Now, the strange thing was I didn't have to go to them. They ended up coming to me because they saw my show as vaudeville. They didn't see my show as rock and roll debauchery. Groucho Marx and, would bring Mae West and George Burns and Fred Astaire to the show because he'd say, remember vaudeville? Yeah, we all did vaudeville. Well, come on, I got vaudeville for you. And it would be our show. I'd get my head cut off, and everybody in the audience, oh, Groucho Marx and the guys are going, yeah. I said, remember 1923 in Toledo? I said, the great Henderson did that. Nothing you do is new. They've seen it all. And Mae West saw that. Fred Astaire saw the dancing skeletons and just went, oh yeah, oh that's good. Yeah, I like that. Didn't faze him one bit, the fact that there was blood flying everywhere. He only saw the tap dancing skeletons and went, oh, they're good dancers. And so incorporating that kind of vaudeville I've created to this day, and I still do. I don't want anything in my show more than vaudeville. I've always thought my show was like the sideshow, the creepy sideshow. With I never wanted to be the big show. I wanted to be the sideshow. It just so happens that the sideshow became the big show.
One more question. Right here, you in the glass. Yeah.
Hi, Alice.
Hi.
I'm shocked.
If a train left Boston at 3 o'clock.
You, thank you. You always play the bad guy in your movies and stuff. Have you ever considered going against type?
In Monster Dog, I played the hero.
Yes, I know.
I hated it. I hated it. But I'll tell you, can I explain Monster Dog to you people, please? Because it needs some explanation. I had just gotten out of an insane asylum for drinking. I didn't go to a country club. They actually put me in this really nice insane asylum that ghost hunters should be probably investigating at this point. And it was full of rich people that instead of going to jail, they got themselves committed to this insane asylum. Yeah, Millie and Billy, all those people were real people. And so, being in this insane asylum, I finally got out. I'll tell you a great story at the very end. The very last thing I'll tell you is a good story. And when I got out, we wrote the album From the Inside about it, me and Bernie Taupin and I did. And, it was one of these things where I said, I've got to do something now where I get up in the morning sober and do a project. So the best thing for me would be a movie. So they came to me and they said, there's this movie they're shooting in Spain. It's called Monster Dog. It's exactly the movie I rent. Those are the movies I rent, C movies. I said, I want to do a really good C movie, and they told me it'll only be released in the Philippines. Okay, great. Nobody will ever see it. And I got up every morning, 6 o'clock. I was the only one down there sober and without smoking. Everybody smoked cigarettes on the set. Everybody was a British cast, Spanish movie and everything. It was fun to do. But I was playing a hero. I was playing the guy with the shotgun. I was, Clint Eastwood in this movie. I wasn't the bad, and even at the end I was a victim. I wasn't really the protagonist. And it was weird being the guy untying the girl from the railroad track rather than putting her on the railroad track. At the end of that movie, though, I proved, I could go 2 months without any alcohol under really stressful, situations. I had to know my lines. I had to know, and it was acting, real acting. So I finally, after that point, after I did that movie, as much as it's always in the classic turkeys of all time and I love that personally. But I learned that I could work without alcohol, and that propelled me on and on and on to do other things, But you have to do that. You have to kind of put yourself in the fire and see if you can, go through the fire without cracking. And that's why we did Monster Dog. But it was bizarre. That movie was just so bizarre. It was such a blur, But getting back to the insane asylum, when I got out of the insane asylum, there was an old man. He was Henry or something, old, and he'd been in there forever. And I'm in my robe, and he's in his robe, and he puts his arm around me, and he goes, Alice, he says, tomorrow you're going home. He said, I'm going to still be in here, but you're going home to a wife and kids and a career. And he says, and I just want you to know that, he says, I want you to go back and get your life together and do it. And I had a little tear in my eye, And he goes, and someday I'm going to get out of here. And when I do, I'm going to kill you. I went, okay, Henry, I got to go now. I don't know if they've let him out yet, but...
Well, Alice, before we leave here, just on behalf of Texas Frightmare Weekend, my production company, Almost Productions, and all these people here and the millions around the world who appreciate everything you've done for rock and roll, for horror, for mixing horror and rock and roll, we would like to present you with a Lifetime Achievement Award.
Oh, look, it's got a little dead...
Befitting Alice Cooper.
Yay, for me. That's very nice. Of course, now you got to get Diana Ross one. You know. Thank you, I appreciate it. You know, if this wasn't so much fun for me, I would have retired a long time ago. But every time I think about retiring, I sit there and I go, that's a good idea. I wonder what that would look like on stage. The next show, I can promise you, is the bloodiest show yet. It's definitely... The other day we were talking about it with the director, Rob Roth is directing it, the guy who directed Beauty and the Beast. And we started looking at some sketches for some of the stuff. And I'm going, really? Really? It's going to be bloody. On a ridiculous level. Okay, thanks a lot, guys. And I'll see you in there.
Upstairs in the green room or something.
We'll be right back.